Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kevin Small. In studio with me, as always, I have Rick Travis. Rick, it's good to see you here.
Thank you.
We do have another call to action coming up this Thursday, guys. And really, Rick, what I wanted to discuss today was the big one. Senate Bill 264 has reared its head once again. We already saw this go through committee, even though there was literally nobody who showed up to support it. And we had plenty of people who came to oppose it. The Senate committee passed it anyways.
Yeah, and what we want you all to remember is there are two laws that are stemming from federal arguments inside our federal apparatus called Congress, which is supposed to represent the people but doesn't appear to be doing so. And the first of those is this thing called the gun show loophole, which does not exist in California. It is just total political rhetoric. And what we need you to realize is what that gun show loophole is saying is that you can just walk into a gun show and either A, walk out with the gun the same day, patently false, illegal, does not happen, hasn't happened in decades, folks. So for people in the media to keep bringing this loophole up, for politicians to keep bringing this loophole up, it's not a loophole if it doesn't exist. The second one that they'll try to fall back with you on when you're talking with them is, you can go and buy all the parts and somehow this ghost gun, which Kevin's going to talk about, magically assembles itself and you walk out with an unserialized gun. Again, a lie. False. Does not happen. It is not true. There is no, read my lips, loophole at gun shows.
Well, yeah, so here's the thing, though. Probably a lot of you watching this already have this understanding. But Rick, how is it really that we change the rhetoric in California? And how is it really that we force our politicians to be transparent? Because they probably know this as well. They're creating all of these laws in the name of safety, but at the end of the day, they've probably never been to a gun show. They are literally just spitting up something that they've heard from their own cabinet, and they're trying to enforce these laws under the guise of being safe. So how is it actually that we can change the future vote for these legislators?
Well, I think it comes down to three key things. One of them that you kind of highlighted, Kevin, is the fact that these legislators aren't thinking for themselves. They're being spoon-fed this rhetoric from groups like the Brady Campaign, the Giffords Group, which are financed, as you know, by people like Bloomberg and Soros. So what we need to be able to do is start making sure our rhetoric and our facts, not our fears, but our facts get on those desks. And that comes through you, the voter. We need you calling up your representatives. We need you getting on and saying, no, quit lying. This is the truth. Facts over fear. The second thing is voting for people in elections, judges, sheriffs, city council members who actually operate on truth, not lies. And finally, talking to your neighbors. One of the problems in our community is, and I get it, folks, I'm inherently the same way. Why am I talking about this? This is common sense. This is stupid. But the fact is, that's what our opposition banks on. Us just discussing how dumb this is between ourselves and never talking to the public. We need to come out and talk to the public and set the record straight. And Kevin, you have some of the best programs for that.
Well, yeah, we sure do. And the chapters are going to be activated for this one. So if you are not already involved in a chapter, go ahead and contact CRPA. If you do know how to contact your local chapter, get in touch with them. We've got tools necessarily put in place to make it super easy for you to advocate for your rights. And I just got to say, I was talking with my neighbor when I got home yesterday. You got a quick back and forth, and it's like, you know what? Maybe we should do a pizza and a Ducks game some night. And it's really not that hard, Talk to your neighbor and say, hey, what do you think about going to the gun show? See what it's about. Maybe they've never been, and maybe you can change a mind, because if they haven't been and they're looking at a bill like this, maybe they're supporting it because they just don't know. And I think ultimately it's important for us to work the networks that we have. And ultimately we need our legislators to be transparent. And if they're not being transparent, they need to get out, period. And honestly, I mean, Rick, speaking about transparency, maybe this is a good segue. What is one thing that a politician can do if they don't necessarily have the evidence they need to push a bill? Is you stack the numbers. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen like this with in politics is the crime rates with gun violence. You know, they'll show you a national total of 30,000 gun deaths, but most of them actually aren't actually gun violence. A lot of them are suicides, and while that is tragic, what they're doing is padding statistics to make something look worse than it actually is, and we're seeing that here with ghost guns.
Yeah, and one of those is how they bump up the numbers, and we need you to point this out, is they're using something called an unlawful altered firearm. It's something that any of us have ever worked in law enforcement, the court systems, the criminal system, and even the people in the media know about. In fact, earlier today when we talked to Roy Griffith, he had this to say.
For my entire law enforcement career, it's been unlawful to possess any firearm with the serial number removed. That is not a ghost gun. That is, in and of itself, a felony to possess an altered firearm with the serial number or identification numbers removed. A ghost gun is a firearm that is built by an individual that does not and has never had a serial number. Huge difference.
Having heard what Roy said, who was a career law enforcement officer and a deputy chief for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, which, by the way, has more contact hours with people with firearms than any other agency in the state, you need to realize this isn't rhetoric. These are facts that when you take a serial numbered gun and you take off that serial number, that is a felony in of itself. Using a crime, it's another felony. So when politicians trying to make this look more serious than it really is, take those illegal firearms and they place it in the same basket as somebody who went to a show and bought the parts and assembled the firearm over a period of time is the same thing. They're not. They never have been. They never will be. But politicians are lying to you when they use those numbers to inflate, to make it a bigger story.
Right. So you have a clear distinction here is basically what you're saying.
Right.
You have a manufacturer who makes a firearm and puts a serial number on it versus an individual who mills his own firearm. And that's what they would have generally called a ghost gun. And you know, the terminology is whatever, but you have firearms that have serial numbers and don't. But what you're really starting to add to that is a crime, a criminal activity of an individual altering a firearm made by a manufacturer that has a serial number on it and purposefully taking it off so that the firearm can't be traced in any way. It's silly to mix a crime, a known crime, something that we've prosecuted for many years, and compile that into a group of statistics with maybe an individual who wants to mill his own firearm. This is ridiculous, but again, this is about transparency. They are trying to inflate these numbers to make you, the voter, think that something is worse than it actually is, and ultimately it just gets their way in infringing in our Second Amendment rights.
And when talking to that friend, whether it be taking them to a game, having a cup of coffee, or a beer in the backyard after you mow a lawn or something, here's another fun fact that you might want to bring to them that just demonstrates how vigorously the opposition is working against us. They use that term ghost gun, which is one of the terms I hate the most. It's out there, so we have to use it to be able to educate you and the rest of the public about it. But let's go back to a guy that I think most Americans look up to. His name was George Washington. And George Washington, in one of his first patents, said Americans had the right to manufacture their own firearms. So this term ghost gun, they weren't putting serial numbers on them back then. That's not what the founding fathers had in mind. Now that's something we do now when we manufacture firearms, but my point is just the term ghost gun is another example of the installing fear over facts. The fact is, this isn't a new concept of the everyday American being able to assemble a firearm. This is almost a 250-year-old concept, and some would argue fundamental right. So as always, like we tell you here, be safe, shoot straight, and fight back. And how do they get a hold of us, Kevin?
Well, you can leave a like here, you can leave a comment, follow us on all of our social media. It really helps us out, guys, to get the word out. We need everybody working. I got to tell you, Rick, last year went by like that. It went by super quick. And guess what? Next year, 2022, is another election year. So we need to start organizing and we need to start working now. That begins with education. Education comes from the proper information. So let's get this info out to as many folks as possible so that they can make informed decisions. As always, thanks again, guys. We'll see you next time.